Okay, our next session is from Marco Amoedo. He's the CTO of Microsoft Business Solutions for KPMG, and he'll be talking to us today about the critical topic of data security in the Microsoft Power Platform.
Hey, thank you, Aaron. Let me just share my screen. We'll get started. Hold on. Let me share the whole screen so we don't have problems. Screen. There we are. Can you see my screen now? I'm assuming so.
So we see
yes,
it.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so thanks everyone. Thanks for allowing me to share a bit of time today with you. My name, as Aaron says, Marco Amoedo. I work as the CTO for EMEA and KPMG International. So the other side of the pond at the moment, but it's about 9 p.m. here. But this is the brilliant part of some of the events moving online. I get to present and share time with you guys. You have some links there, but the concept of what we're going to talk today is about data security in the Power Platform. And this is a topic that I'm very interested into because there are lots of things that we tend to miss or focus on the wrong areas. To illustrate this, let me show you a picture. So I've been working with the Power Platform for over 15 years now, since CRM 1.2 days, which I want to call it the unseen Power Platform in a sense, but that's a whole topic for another day. But many of the things we see today on the security roles, on the modeling of data security in the Power Platform come or originate from those days. And in this picture, I want to tell you a story of how sometimes we have to fight our bias if we've been working with the common data service or whatever is the new name Microsoft chose for this, Project Oakdale. If you see this picture, you'll see an Allied plane on the Second World War and see the red dots where the survivor, the planes that were coming back from fights where they had what they thought were higher chances of getting hit by air defenses or whatever it was, enemy planes. So they decided to reinforce those areas, thinking, well, that's where we get more hits. That's where we should reinforce. What they did forget, I guess, is they were only looking at the planes that came back, not the planes that actually never came back, that they crashed because of the enemy fire. And obviously you see it now, but you see there that the cockpit, the engines, the middle of the plane were the areas that didn't have any impacts, and those probably were the high damage areas that would down the plane and that should be reinforced. So that was big error or big mistake. They were looking only at the survivor planes. And with the security in the Power Platform, we got a similar story. Sometimes we forget that the security is not just the common data service. There are many things around it. Obviously, today we're going to focus on a few tips and tricks around the modeling of the security in the common data service, and I'm going to cover lots of things based on experience on security roles, etc. But before going into that, let me just explain you the whole range of layers that we got available there. So obviously, yes, we got the CDS, the common data service, if we are using that for our data, and we are going to go in deep we're going to cover that thoroughly now. But above the CDS, we got more layers. First of all, we got applications now. So we can configure applications and define access controls for those applications we're sharing. So in the past, we didn't have that concept of applications. Now we got applications, and if we don't add the entity or the form or whatever it is to the application, users won't access it. So we can control or segregate the data and apply some restrictions using applications within an environment. There are more layers, obviously. We got the environments and data loss prevention policies. We can segregate now by environment, so we can have multiple environments on our tenant and segregate data and applications that way. So we got some range of security controls. We can share or define what teams, AD, Active Directory teams, get access to environments. We can share apps with specific users or teams. And then we also got the data loss prevention policies. If you haven't looked at them, I encourage you to do so. They're really a powerful element for security and control the flow of data. But even above that, we got more mechanisms that we tend to forget. There is one very simple thing, which is licensing. You don't have license to Power Apps, you don't get access to the Power Platform components. So that's actually a security mechanism. So users shouldn't have licenses if they are not intended to use any or access any of your environments. But the ultimate defense layer on security here, outside of the CDS, outside of the Power Apps, outside of the Power Platform, is Active Directory. Active Directory has really powerful mechanisms to control security and access to applications. It's not just the authentication. We got things like authorization, as I mentioned, with this, the teams and security and sharing of apps and environments, but also conditional access capabilities to define where we allow people to use our apps, our data. And let me just make a brief overview of conditional access before we move on to the CDS and the role-based security model. So for those of you that are not familiar with this, and I'm not an expert by any means on this, this is a very wide topic, but it's something that you should always have in mind, okay? We live within the Microsoft environment. Our apps, the Power Platform, the CDS live there. So we are protected by Active Directory, and we have access to these app protection and conditional access policies. So we are able to do things like, okay, you can use Power Apps, but only if you are on an authorized device or on a location that I trust, or I require you to do, if I could define things like, for example, if you are working from home in a network that I don't know, I'm gonna force you to do multi-factor authentication. That way, when you are in the office and I'm pretty sure you are who you say you are, I'm not gonna bother you with the multi-factor. But if you are away, or something dodgy or something that I don't understand where you're coming from, I'm gonna force you to do multi-factor authentication or even block the access. And then we can also apply app protection policies. So things like not being able to copy and paste data if you're using a mobile device or other type of device. So all of that is super easy to define in Active Directory. It requires premium components, E5 or Active Directory Premium, but it's super powerful and a way to secure our data as well and prevent some of the things that in the past we tried to do with funny, extensions on the CRM. But just remember that that's there, and we can use it to protect the access to applications. So going back to the thing, what we're going to focus on today for the next half an hour or so is the CDS role-based security model. Most of you will be familiar with it, have used it before. What I'm going to try today is give you a few tips. Let's do a brief overview of what it is, and then look at tips based on experiences. So first of all, if you're not familiar with the security model, there are two principles. There are two security principles: users and teams. Okay, those are the only two components or elements that can own or control access to records. Then we got the privileges and roles, and essentially these define privileges you have, operations you can perform over records, and and the roles are groups of these privileges. Okay, and when you define a privilege, you define it with a depth related to a hierarchy, and that's the third component of the security model of the Power Platform, the depth. The depth allows you to define the reach of your privilege. Remember, you can create business units in an environment, and you can define if, for example, your read access on the account entity is only for your own records, for your records on the same business unit, or navigate depths for child business unit or organization wide. That's very important, as you will see later. But this is essentially these three things: the security principles, the privilege and roles, grouping them, and the depth is all the ingredients to create a very complex security model that we can apply to our common data service. So how this works? Well, these are really all image, believe it or not. This comes from the days of CRM 2011 and even before CRM 4, and it still applies. It's still at the core the same thing. So how does this work? Well, the first thing when we as a user try to access a record is to do a privilege check. This is what the Power Platform does, or the CDS in this case does. So if I try to access an account record and I don't have a privilege for that, the answer is no, access denied. I won't be able to open that record or see that record, read that record. Okay. Same if I want to create a record. If I don't have the privilege to create that type of record, access denied. Okay. But the important thing here is also this check goes across all the roles that I hold. Just keep that in mind because it will come handy later. So essentially, do I have that privilege in any of my roles? No, denied. Yes. Okay. Let's continue. If I have that privilege, then am I the owner of the record? If I am the owner, then I get access because that's the minimum privilege you always get, right? If me is my user is the owner of the record and I got the privilege, access granted. Now, I might be in more security principles, as we mentioned before, and we'll talk about teams in a second, but I can also be part of a team that might be the owner of the record. If that happens and I got the privilege, access granted through that security principle. So it's a privilege attached to a security principle that is the owner. So I get there to access granted. Now, if I'm not the owner, here comes the fun. Is the depth checks going through the hierarchy. In that case, I need to start checking whether any of the privileged depth of my security principles allows me to access that record. So for example, if I got business unit read access and the record is owned by someone on my business unit, then yeah, access granted because I got business unit. But if it was on a different business unit, decline. Okay. Well, not decline. We go and check on other things. So if the depth doesn't give me access, then I need to do a last check, which is going through the sharing checks, the POA. That's a very familiar name for many of us that had to implement complex security models in the past, and is a name we all are afraid of. That's a table on, believe it or not, an actual table on the Common Data Service, principal object access, that holds all the sharing permissions. But anyway, if you have the privilege, but you're not the owner and you don't have the depth access, then we check if the record has been shared with any of your principals. If you have access granted through sharing, then access granted, otherwise denied. But the important thing is the order of things here, because that is something that you need to keep in mind. For example, I always say this, when someone starts creating entities in the Common Data Service, you might recall there is an option to say whether the entity is going to be user or team owned or organization owned. Normally, my advice, if you don't know what you're doing or you're not sure, just leave it user and team on, because you can always, with the security configuration or security roles, you can always reach the same access as organization owned. The only advantage of organization owned is essentially it kills all of this. There is no ownership, right? So the access checks to access a record are much faster. Either you have the privilege or not. If you don't have the privilege, denied. There is no checks of the ownership, no checks of privilege depth, no checks of sharing. So the access is much faster. And if your security model doesn't require complex security, only access or not to records, then organization owned is a perfect fit there. And that's the reason this whole algorithm we got in front. Okay, so what is this sharing thing? Because now we understand the three core components. We understand how the algorithm goes, and sharing is the granular record level control. However, it should only be used as an exception. And the reason for that is, again, that table, and you got it there in front of you. When we do checks for the principal objects access table, we have to do joins on system users to principals with these users. So for example, if I'm the user one, I get the principal for my own user, but also I'm a member of team A, team B, so I get those three. And then I need to check another join to the POA table and see what privileges I get for being user one or for being on team A or team with the record read and update. So it's kind of a expensive query to the database, particularly if this table, the principal object access, grows big. If that grows big, we start to be slower and slower and slower, and you start to have performance problems. So we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that table growing, okay? And that's quite important. So sharing should only be the exception. And unfortunately, in the past, ancient, let's say, versions of what is this today, the Common Data Service, when we were working with the CRM 3 and 4, so on, we didn't have other mechanisms to avoid sharing in complex scenarios like wealth management, private banking, stuff like that. So we resorted to lots of sharing to do granular control of records, and that was bad for performance, right? Okay, so what other mechanism we have to make this better? Well, that's teams. Teams got introduced many years ago, but teams is a fantastic mechanism. There are two types of teams. One is owner teams, and that, by all intents and purposes, behaves like a user. So it's a security principle that works like a user, can be assigned a role. So you create a team, you assign roles to the team, they can own records, and they're fantastic when a team controls access to high data volumes, for example, by ownership or by business unit access. As a side note, they can be scheduled. If you're working on field services or universal resources scheduling, the owner teams are they really like a user, so they can be scheduled and everything. The owner teams, as I said, own record security roles. One thing to remember: every business unit business unit you create comes with a default created owner team. That team is a bit special. Only users from that business unit can be members of that team. So just remember that for one of the tips. We'll come back to this on the VIP records. The other types of teams are access teams. Access teams, they're great. They're really good to do an efficient record-based sharing mechanism. And this comes from particularly sales scenarios or project-based scenarios. It allows users to be members of thousands of teams and automates the life cycle of sharing. But they're not really a security principle. That's why they are hidden from most team views. They're not really a security principle, and that's the trick they perform. They are kind of a mechanism to reduce the sharing. So for example, typical access teams scenario, sales, big company sales, corporate sales, where we do deals that require a plan, and it's a pitch of that that we have to prepare. It's a deal that takes months to work on with multiple people. We might have an account manager, a technical architect. It might be familiar to many of you, but it's a team-based work effort to sell something, right? So everyone on that team needs to get access to that sales opportunity record to see what's going on and stuff. In the past, if you wanted to control at that level, you had to, share that record individually with all the users. Now, Access Teams allows you to create a template of permissions, apply it, and then when you create a new record, it automatically, if you create a new opportunity, it automatically creates an Access Team, and then you can add members to that team. As you add members to that team, they get sort of share access to that record, okay, with the permissions defined on the template. That's great because instead of sharing with individually with user by user, for example, if we got 20 users being part of that team, instead of having 20 shares, we only have one with the Access Team, right? So we reduce. And it allows, as I said, membership for thousands of teams. You will see in a second when we talk about efficiency and performance why this is important to keep in mind. Owner teams could do the same as access teams, but they're only good when a team controls access to a high volume of data. We don't want hundreds of teams, or we don't want users being members of hundreds of teams, because that will have a huge performance impact, as we'll see later. So access teams, good for high volume, automated sharing. Owner teams, good to control access to high data volumes, but as a user. What else we can do? Well, that's at the we've been talking about the record level. Another feature that we got available is the field level security. We can also control security at the level of fields. Okay, so sometimes we might want to hide just or make read only or make some sensitive piece of data, make it with field level security. Just apply that profile and off you go, right? That allows you to control the access to that piece of data. So my role might give me access to this bunch of records that we got here, the top 3. But if I don't have the field security profile to see the email, when I access these records, the email will just come blank or with stars, asterisks. And that's because that field level security gives me access to that type of data. So it's kind of a perpendicular thing to security roles and the profiles. You have to enable the attribute for field level security. It's a simple way to protect sensitive subsets of data. It's great, and you can assign field level security profiles to user and teams. So if any security principal, user or teams. So if you want to control sensitive data, email, social security numbers, whatever it is, you could do it this way. So only allow to certain people to see the value of those fields, or modify. It could be read only, could be all those things. Okay, so teams, field level security. What else we got? Well, in certain scenarios, the business unit hierarchy doesn't work. And business units are great again, but you shouldn't create far too many, because if you do that, it has a memory footprint, it has a caching mechanism for the security principles, and it can impact performance. So in some scenarios where we got hierarchies defining access, like contact centers or sales organization, this hierarchy access mechanism can work as well in your favor. So instead of defining depth through only the business units, you can enable hierarchy. If you enable hierarchies, you can choose to either do a manager type of hierarchy or a position type of hierarchy. If you define the manager hierarchy, the hierarchy is defined by the manager value of the user record. So, if I'm the manager of another user, you have to define that on the user record on the CDS, right? And that defines the hierarchy. When you define the hierarchy access, you can also define a level of the reach of the hierarchy. I think 3, 5, whatever it is, the roll up, and then when that hierarchy is defined, the privilege roll up through the hierarchy. So, for example, if I'm the manager of user A, I get the roll up privilege of the user A, but only the direct privilege, ownership and sharing. So if that user owns a record, I can do the same as he does on that record, because effectively I also own the record. If another user shares read access to a record with that user, I also get that read access. So essentially I'm, let's say, impersonating that user, okay? That could be the definition. That's for direct reports. In direct reports, people lower on the hierarchy is read-only access, okay? That's only for the first level. The rest is read-only. And we can define the depth of that. The position hierarchy works similarly, but instead of being a manager relation, is a position. So we create a hierarchy of positions. Let's say contact center agent, supervisor agent, shift supervisor, site supervisor, whatever it is. We create those positions, assign people to the positions, and then define the hierarchy of positions. So anyone that is, for example, a site supervisor will have direct access to the records of the supervisors. Anyone that's a supervisor, access to the agents and so on. So that's the type of hierarchy. Is instead of a manager, it's based on the positions, right? Very useful. It's another mechanism that we can use to avoid, creating complex structure of business units or other things, and it's there for us to use. So now the $1,000,000 questions. Which one we should use? How we decide? What is the main point on how we decide on these things? Well, there are 3 things, but essentially it's maintenance, scalability, and performance. So how we start to make an idea of how the different decisions impact on this? Well, first of all, we need to avoid complexity. The more complex the checks we have to do, or the platform has to do to decide whether a user sees or reads or creates that record, the more costly on compute time, etc., will be. So we need to consider that or based on the algorithm that we saw at the beginning. First of all, ownership, the depth access, and then sharing. So if we can solve most of our security needs by ownership, great, because we'll never get into check depths of do complex calculations on the business unit hierarchy or position hierarchy or whatever. And if we can solve it through ownership and depth, we'll never get to sharing. Fantastic, because we don't have to go to the principal object access. So the earlier we solve that, the cheaper it will be. Now that comes with a counter side. So the number of roles and teams is also very important. I'll tell you a little story here. When this is the very old days, so I don't know what's the number before, but just number today. But just to give you an idea, in the past, for sort of every user, you could get a few megabytes of data cache in your web server every time they access the organization. The first time you access, or a user accesses the CDS, the servers have to cache in memory all the owner teams and associated roles with that user. So it goes and finds all the business units, all that are there. So for the organization, it needs to cache all the business units or the hierarchies, etc. Gets cached the first time a user accesses that environment. And then for every user, the system has to cache in memory the teams and all all the security principles, so the user and also the teams, the owner teams that are associated with that user or you are a member of, and all the security roles associated to that. That's a lot of information. If you have, imagine, you're a member of hundreds or tens of owner teams, and every team has different security roles, and then all of a sudden you're creating a huge cache of data. If you have too many, the cache becomes too big, and then you have too many hits, too many misses on cache, having to go to database to do checks, and it starts to impact the performance of your environment. So that's why, remember when we were talking about teams, access teams and owner teams are a bit different. Owner teams good if you don't have too many and give you access to a wide range of data. Access teams are great because they are actually not a security principle, so they don't get cache, but they are efficient sharing. You go to sharing, but there is still efficient or more efficient to have thousands than having to cache thousands of teams, right? And then, obviously the sharing, careful, don't use sharing without control, because if that grows fast, can be a source of performance issue. So those are the three things. Remember the algorithm, the volume of security principles and roles we're going to cache, and the size of the sharing table. If you keep that in mind, then let's look at the tips, because this based on many of projects and experience of different people. This is not just me. This comes. I'll give you some sources for this later, but these are very important things to keep in mind. First of all, tip number one: do not follow the organization structure. In many scenarios, and you'll find in your projects, if you try, the first thing when we think about business units is, we follow the same story as our, our company, organization, whatever it is, structure. But sometimes that doesn't reflect security. So, for example, it might be that in this case we got here this corporation in EMEA. It's got 2 locations: Poland, Czech Republic, and in Asia we got Korea, right? In Poland, we got a security model for whatever compliance reason that needs to be managed at the branch level. So, we need devs and we have to have branches, branch A, branch B, fine. So everyone on branch A can see everything on branch A, but not in branch B. Yeah, you get it. In Czech Republic, it doesn't go on branches. It goes on, product lines, C and I, whatever. We create different business units for that. They actually don't reflect the structure of the company. They just product lines. So everyone working on commercial installations, for example, C, has access to all those records. So we got business unit access there. Anyone working on industrial installations, I, has access. So instead of going by branches, we go by business line. That's different, right? And in other country, we don't need, everyone gets access to everything on the country in Korea. So we don't even model anything further. Everyone gets access there. We do business unit access there. Or it might be record level, whatever. But what I'm trying to see here or say is think about the security needs and not the corporate structure, because that normally is not the answer. Second tip on this: when you have to do complex things and get, in matrix organizations that need to cross and achieve multi-business unit membership, use teams. You can achieve that with teams. So let's say, for example, I'm a product manager for one of our products and needs access to all the industrial opportunities across our business, the world. How do I do that? Well, I can, sorry. I cannot be a member of multiple business units. A user can only be a member of a business unit, and that defines the position on the hierarchy, where your roles apply, etc. How do I achieve multi-business unit membership? Well, using teams. Add the user as a member to a team that pertains to a business unit, and all of a sudden, that behaves as if a member of that business unit with the security roles that this team has on that business unit. Same thing, if I want it to be in Korea, I can do that. So, and I'll show you an example of that in a second, but that is very useful for our next thing, which is modeling. A combination of these two tips is how do I do complex security model. This is based on some technique actually used for logic circuitry, how to minimize the number of gates and logic digital circuits, but it's essentially very simple. Just try to get your okay. So I in this case I need to model by country and then different regions on country, and then different product lines and different products, etc. I can go and add those dimensions across on a table. First on the columns, sorry, on the rows, then on the columns, you choose, but try to keep it even. So you start to build that. Now, if I need someone that needs access to everything on country A, everything underneath this country A, I can do business unit, okay? Because we go here, we cover this, is business unit. Everything that goes horizontally is going to be a business unit. It's here, country A, membership, and give the parent child access, so I get access to all of this. If I need across product lines, again, business units, I can do that. So for example, I can do, as we said before, or even bigger access, we can go, again, business units. Now, everything vertically will be done with teams. So if I need access to the product line, product 22 opportunities across all different business unit, what I do is create, a team for that in every business unit that I need, and then add the user to that team. So it'll be here, here, and so on. Okay. If I need access to bigger things, bigger teams, I can put the team at a different level. So it could be, for example, the product line 3, whatever is not reflected here, but product line 2, I put the team here and here, so I get access to all of that. And that takes me to the third tip, which is the VIP records. The VIP records are typical in banking. In many scenarios, Teams is fantastic for this. How do we do this? Just create a separate business unit. No one is a member of that business unit. No one. So no one has access to records on that business unit. Then create a team on that business unit who owns the VIP records. Whenever I want to hide a record from someone else, I just assign it to that team. And then only the people that are member of that VIP team get to see the record. Simple, clean, ownership based, no sharing, nothing. Very efficient. Only one team, only ownership. If you need different segregation of VIP records, okay, create several teams or whatever it is. But that is the VIP business unit is a typical one, and this only got there thanks to team membership. It's a very, very efficient way instead of having to share records. In the past, if you wanted to achieve these VIP records, you had to remove access to everyone and then share back with everyone and do stuff like that. That was very inefficient. Then we got also sensitive record details. Sometimes field level security is great, but if you add too many fields on field level security, that can start to complicate things, have some performance issues and so on, and it's difficult to maintain. Sometimes it's actually good to not follow real world object boundaries and break the records differently. Okay, just break them to simplify and optimize. You can, for example, take a new entity, put all the financial information on that, and essentially just give people access to the financials through a team or through other thing parented from the account, instead of apply field level securities. And we got fantastic mechanism now. For example, the the record cards or the quick view forms, and even the some of the PCF controls that we can create now allow us to hide that complexity from users. So we are a bit tight on time, but let me just quickly show you something on this, and then we'll take some questions. Okay, very quickly. I got here a user, Mario, another different user. You see Mario's got access to, can see 2 accounts here. Okay, just let me refresh this. Mario sees Marco's account and Mario account. That's great. I got here, and that's the app we're using, Demo Security. Remember, you can share apps and so on to control access. But if I access this Demo Security app as Marco, so now I'm Marco, I can also see those 2 accounts. But I'm gonna go ahead and make this account a VIP account. So I'm gonna hide it. And how do I do that? I just change the owner to the VIP owner. Save it. And the VIP owner is a team. I'm a member of that team. So for all intents and purposes, there's no changes for me. I can still see that account. Everything is fine. But now for Mario, and this is Mario, yeah. Sorry, I did something wrong here. I might have added Mario to the VIP owner, sorry. Anyway, you get the idea. Sorry, I was playing with this before, and I might added Mario to. I have added Mario to the VIP records. That account now, the VIP owner is a team that pertains to a different business unit. That business unit is here. Is on my security. Yeah, I'm just going on the old model, but you got this business unit, VIP records. So the VIP owner and now all the records shared or owned by that are not visible for users on the other setting. Another way of also looking at the financials and stuff, I got here, see this separate entity financials to hold details. That is on account with financials. If we look at Mario's security roles, Mario doesn't have access to financials. So he cannot see that form for starters, because I got that form hidden, and he cannot see the financials record, so won't get access to that. However, he's got access to a secret field here, which is a field level security field that I don't have access to on the other side. So you can balance things as we were saying. Anyway, interest of time, I'll just jump to questions, but I'm gonna leave you these 2 links. This is the source of all the information on the Power Platform security controls, all we've been talking today, also all the links. And this is an old but really relevant white paper written by some clever people at Microsoft for 2015, but it still applies today on all we've been talking today, performance, lots of details about how the security model works and the internals. Those 2 there. So let's jump into questions.
Thank you, Marco. We do have about 6 minutes left here. So we invite any questions. As a longtime Dynamics 365 consultant, I've been through many projects with many security issues. And I appreciate your feedback on this, and gave me some new ideas to try. So definitely appreciate that.
Hey, Marco. Thank you. This is great. I have quick question.
Sure.
So when we, okay, so you talked a little bit about the POA table, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. So that was one of the reasons to have access team, so that there are not many entries, right? Mm-hmm. But still, if I have parental relationship, let's assume I have like 5 or 10 child entity, mm-hmm. and I set up parental relationship, right? So that means when I give access to a user through access team on a parent record, platform implicitly does the same for child record. But as on today, if I'm not wrong, what platform does, platform still make 10 multiplied by, if let's say 10 user, 100 entries in a POA table, right? So it actually doesn't leverages the access team, right? So if I have a complex hierarchical entities, then how do we design it? So that, there is no load in the POA.
No, and that's actually a really relevant thing that we didn't touch on. But sharing is every time you go and do share on there, it's not just one record on the POA table. It will cascade if you have that parental relationship. So it's very easy to have exponential growth on that table, and that's dangerous. There is another weird sharing thing. If I reassign a record, so if I assign it to someone else, it shares back with me. It's another side effect of assigning. So I retain access. There is no trick for that. There is only being conscious that it shares. The access teams minimize this in a sense because it won't do all the sharing with every user. It does only with that access team, but you still have that sharing. I don't think there is a silver bullet, but if you go to that white paper that I mentioned, there are some statistics on when you should start to worry about these. And some complex scenarios, it might help you to look at some of the scenario. I seem to remember there was one particularly on the hierarchy sharing, but also consider hierarchy positions and all that. But yeah, I'll be happy to discuss any specific if you want to shoot me an email or contact in LinkedIn. But yeah, this is difficult to
Sure.
Yeah.
If you can ping that URL of the white paper, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll actually gonna put it on the chat now. So
yeah, I have a client right now where they we're trying to clean up the sharing table, and I've been with the product long enough to remember back when everyone was on premise and there were SQL scripts you could run to clean up the sharing table.
Yeah.
As I found out, there's not certain things you can do. If it was explicit sharing that was done by a user, you can get in there with the SDK and clean that up. But the implicit sharing that's done by the platform, we have no hooks into that now. So I actually am working on a Microsoft ticket with Microsoft to go in and clean out the implicit sharing that we no longer want.
Those side effects are massive. And I remember, all days where we didn't have teams and tried to do some of the complex security models for banking. It was a nightmare. We ended up with millions of records in the POA table. It was like a dog. It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And yeah, but unfortunately, I haven't seen that in a long time. There is still issues. There's still, you have to be careful. But we got more with a little bit more of consideration with ownership teams and stuff, and it's much better today.
Yeah, it would be nice if Microsoft gave us some ways to get in there and visualize what's being shared.
Yeah,
to have a GUI that would show it to us, and also to have some controls to revoke that implicit sharing.
Yeah. No, the tooling it should be much better, but it's an area that has been always a bit underrated in a sense that it's been there, but not lots of investments going on. I think, but the other, I guess, we get edge cases, and that's where we stuff. My wish has always been to have same as in other products like SharePoint, where you don't have negative permissions. Instead of doing positive permissions only like we do, being able to say this record, remove permissions to everyone, or remove the
Yeah, that would be nice to have for sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure we could talk about security edge cases. I had one client, they had a product that had their product table. They must have had over 125 attributes on it, and they had field level security on probably about 100 of them. So that was, talk about a performance killer. So, all right, we really appreciate it, Marco, and we're ready to move on. We're at our time here. So thank you very much. Thanks for staying up late with us on a Sunday.
Awesome.
And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Aaron, and hopefully next time I'll get to make it in person to New York. Thank you,
We
guys,
look
and
forward
thanks
to
for the
that.
invite.
Thanks a lot.